So you were married in 1969 and went on to have children in the 70s and 80s. But before we get into the whole marriage side of your life, can we talk a little bit about the era in which you found yourself and the context of it? And in order to do so, let's listen to this question.
Hello, this is a message from Mum all the way from Lisbon. If you could speak about the early years of the Troubles and how that affected you whenever you were younger, that'd be brilliant.
Right, thank you, Mark, for that. That is probably one of the most important things that happened in our lifetime, and we were all affected by it, no matter how little or how great. In 1969, we were coming down the Falls Road after visiting the Brennans. That's my cousin Elizabeth Comerton and her husband Frank. They lived in Suffolk, and we were on our way back down home when there were bottles of stuff coming across, fire coming across the top of the car from one side of the road and stuff coming across from the other side of the road. And I was petrified. I said, Brenton, turn left, turn left. He says, I can't turn left. That's a Protestant area. I said, well, turn right, turn right. But I can't turn right. That's a Catholic area. That they're throwing, petrol bombs at each other. So we eventually got down the road. And in my imagination, it was couple due to get married, found dead in burned out car on the Falls Road. That's all I could see, the headlines in the paper. But that was about, for that length of time, that was the worst that we had ever encountered. Brendan then gone up and down to the surgery up the Falls Road, had to stop the car a couple of times because there were people rioting on the street and gunmen on the street. Now, not every day, but the odd day. And then there was the Ulster Workers' Council strike, which was really dreadful. Nobody could go to work. It was 1974, I think, because you were all babies and we were able to go down. Luckily, had Cushendall at that time, where Brendan is from. So we decamped to Cushendall. Lucky people.
Which is a little town an hour outside of Belfast on the coast. If you picture the island of Ireland, it's like practically the closest point of Ireland to Scotland.
Yes, we can see Scotland from our house. So we were there and stayed for about 5 days, listening to every single news. And there were people commentating. And the first thing was we were on a knife edge. And then we were on a razor blade edge. And we were sitting there going, ooh, how hard is it going to get? Trying to keep things light and to not let you people be frightened about what was going on in Belfast and in Derry. So that was over. People, they just stopped people on the road. Nobody could go to work or anything and stopped you on the road with guns. These are ordinary men, like pretending they were like vigilantes. Where were you going? How dare you go? Where did you get your petrol from? We're not allowing anybody to get petrol. Those were very frightening days. And then, can I go back to 1972? We were going out one night to Culloden with John and Rosemary McHugh. Couldn't get a babysitter. Eventually, I rang my father's cousin, Joan Owens, and she said, oh, Anne will babysit for you. She's in town, but she'll babysit. And I said, that's great, Joan. Thank you. So Brendan went down to collect Anne. Joan said, Anne's not here, but I'll have to babysit for you because she's gone into town. But just drive me around Carlisle Circus I check if her car's there. Little red car was there. So Joan came up and babysat. And then I'd heard on the radio that there had been a bomb in the Abercorn, which was a beautiful restaurant come coffee shop in Cornmarket in the centre of Belfast, and a lot of people killed and blown up and terrible news coming through. So there's a telephone number and I rang it up and they said, right, okay, well, here's our, number, an extra number if you need to have any more information. So when Joan came up to babysit, I said, Joan, there's a number just for you to relax yourself. So I heard her saying brown jacket, brown trousers, a ring on her right hand, And they said, oh, thank you very much. We will keep in touch with you. What's your number? So we went off to Culloden and came back, and there was Father Armstrong and the doctor who lived in Glencoe Park standing on the doorstep, and I jumped out of the car, ran up, and they said, it's all right, Noelle, it's not your daddy. And I said, look, I know it's not my daddy. It must be Anne. I went in, and there was Anne and her husband Fergie, and he had just been down to identify Anne's body. She and her friend, I'll remember her name sometime, sat at the exact table that the bomb had been left under in a bag, and they were blown to smithereens. Breen was the girl's name, and her father was a surgeon, and he was up all that evening working in the hospital and didn't know that his daughter was one of the people dead. So Fergie and Joan left our house that night, and Joan said, if you have a baby girl, Noelle, would you call her Anne? And I said, yes, Joan, yes, Joan. So Suzanne was born the following April. That was February, following April, and I called her Suzanne. I hadn't the heart to call her Anne, but called her Suzanne. And it was partly after a friend I was at school with, Suzanne McNichol, but also because Joan asked me to do that. That was the closest that we got, relative-wise, and day on a, the actual action of the evening.
Well, you say that, but what about the very famous incident that took place on our street towards the very end of the Troubles?
Well, you see, we didn't know Pat Finucane very well in those days. He was a solicitor who had just come to live in Fort William Drive. They were there about a year. His lovely wife, Geraldine, and John, and Catherine, and Michael, the oldest fellow was Michael. And Mark used to swim with John Finucane, so I was at the swimming pool getting lessons, sitting beside Geraldine. So I got quite friendly with her then. Lovely, lovely girl. She was a Protestant married to a Catholic, Pat Finucane. She was from East Belfast, had a degree from Dublin, I think that's where she met Pat. So one Sunday evening, February 70, not sure the year, 20, 30 years ago now, Suzanne and I were painting the living room because Brent had gone off to Spain to play golf. And we were so excited. And then I had a bath because I'd paint all over me. I'm in my dressing gown. You're all upstairs, so-called studying. I don't exactly know what you were doing. And the next thing you came down the stairs, and we had moved into the dining room because of the smell of the paint in the other room. And you came down and said, Mummy, there's ribbon round Fort William Drive. And it was like as if, there's a gift wrapped Fort William Drive. And I thought, what's he talking about? And I went out, and there was a policeman on the other side of the wall. And I said, what's happening like Fort William Drive? Nothing ever happens in Fort William Drive. And he says to me, oh, that solicitor round the corner was murdered. And I said, what solicitor? I couldn't think, because most of the people here have been here for years and years, and I knew all of them. And then I came in, I thought, what solicitor? And then I remembered it was Pat Finucane. So that was a dreadful time. And there's been all these years later, Geraldine trying to get justice because there was collusion between the police, the army, and nobody was able to, the road was cleared. There were no security people on the road that night. And it's assumed that the road was cleared for the gunmen to go in and kill Pat. Now that's all assumption. And there's been apologies from ministers after ministers and prime ministers, but nobody has ever looked into it to get justice. And if Geraldine, who's been a wonderful woman, gone to America to get presidents to help her, if she could get justice for Pat, then other people could get justice for their families as well.
Yeah, and that was a very high-profile event that happened at the end of the Troubles.
Mm-hmm.
So between the end of the Troubles and that early incident you were talking about with the babysitter, it was like a long stretch of years when bad things were going on. What was it like bringing up a young family at that time?
Well, there was 30 years of it. People talk about 20 years. There was 30 years of it. And it started in 1969 and went on at least for 30 years, dribs and drabs after that. But we were lucky because of where we live. We were out of the town, not too far out, but we're out of the town. My children were able to go to school. They were able to go on the bus. None of them, as far as I ever heard, got beaten up or got tortured or anything because of their school uniforms. And we kept the news off as much as possible. We intended to listen to the news at night time, the 10 o'clock news in bed on the radio, or to hear what was happening. Brent was addicted to the news, and it was 2 people were killed today, and there was a reprisal for some other murder, and there was a bomb here, and the IRA were blowing up businesses. Didn't matter what kind of Catholic businesses or Protestant business, didn't matter. It was against capitalists, and they ruined the whole of the Falls Road with that. And then there were reprisals on the other side. We've got to kill a Teague because there was a Protestant killed in such a street. And then there was Bloody Friday, which was one of the parts of Bloody Friday was on the Cave Hill Road here. And a woman we knew had gone out from Sunningdale Park to get biscuits because she was having people in for coffee, and she was blowing up on the Cave Hill Road. That was Hugh O'Hare's wife. And we were in Portstewart that time, must have been 72, because we were staying in Marie's house that summer. And then there was Bloody Sunday. We were coming back from Cushendall, heard it on the radio. It was hard to believe that the army had killed people. We just couldn't take that in. But as years have gone on, that has proved to be the truth, that people were protesting. Some of them were children just who happened to be out to look at the protesters. And then there was a priest, Father Daly, coming along, waving a white bloody flag, and people were still being killed on the street. And it was horrific. But luckily, Brent was able to go to his work. He would have been an essential worker, I suppose. And we were able to go to Cushendall, which was the luckiest thing. We got that house in 1972 when you, Gavin, was a baby. You were a baby. And we used that as our boat hole. Went away every weekend. I'd pick you up from school at 3 o'clock, up to the house, Glencoe Park, out of your uniforms, into your ordinary clothes, down to Cushendall. You fought on the car, the 3 of you. I stopped the car many times and said, if you don't stop, I'll put you out to walk. Oh, we'll be good, we'll not fight anymore. And down to Cushendall, and you ran out of the car, and you went down to the slipway, and you played in the rocks. And I had a charmed childhood, and I hope you had as good a childhood as you could have got.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's hard to believe what a normal childhood we had when you put it in its historical context. We had an idyllic childhood, which I'm sure people from other parts of the world might find hard to believe, that you could grow up in Northern Ireland in the 70s and 80s and still, just have had such a wonderful time and sheltered and all the rest of it.
Well, when we would go on holiday, we would meet people and they would say, where are you from? And we would say Northern Ireland. And they would go, oh, bang, 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 bullet, bullet, big bomb. Foreign people. That's all they expected it was about. But we were able to go on holiday every year to the sun. We went out to Spain, went to various places, took you to Florida, went to the Disney World, went to the Kennedy Space Center. We were very, very lucky.